So David is going to give us an overview of what's going on in the industry, the state of the industry sort of stats. So thank you, David.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kerry. So yes, as Kerry said, I'm David Rickard. I'm a partner at Everest Group. Everest Group, for those who don't know, we're a research and advisory firm. We work with all the leading enterprises and leading service providers. And we do predominantly research around IT outsourcing, BPO outsourcing, as well as pricing, locations, and we've also developed a practice in the last couple of years focused on impact sourcing. So we've got a lot of focus in that area. We've got about 500 people in the research side, so we're doing a lot of coverage in that area. My own personal area is customer experience management, as well as trust and safety and content moderation, and also marketing services. So I've got a team of about 28 analysts focused in this area. And so we do a lot of research at the moment. There's a lot around generative AI, there's a lot around impact sourcing though, how we're leveraging that, new locations, all of those areas. So I know the theme of today is around sustainability. You're not going to see a lot of sustainability from me. There is one slide at the end because I felt I needed one. But what we wanted to do is just give you a sense of what's happening in the industry to really be able to put things into context. And what I wanted to talk about is our annual key issue study. So every year we do a study, we talk to over 150 enterprises globally about the issues and challenges that they're facing in 2024. The reason we wanted to do that is because it's great to talk about sustainability, and that is a topic that enterprises are interested in, but they've also got their business challenges, and without fixing your business challenges, you don't have a business to worry about sustainability. So we wanted to just shine the light on some of the challenges that businesses are facing, and we're always happy to have a conversation about, obviously, how you can fix them. But we've got, on that end, our key issue study, representatives from across the sourcing, the IT, the operations areas, as well as in-house captive centres, GBSs as we call them. So a really good cross-section. About 25% is, or 28% is from EMEA, 50% is from the US. So not totally skewed towards the US, but obviously that's where the big base of a lot of our enterprise buyers are based. But what we wanted to do is just set the scene a little bit in terms of what we're seeing in the market. So this was the key issue number one, which is when we polled the audience, what is your biggest challenge in 2024? And by far the biggest issue that came out was cost and margin pressure. Second was adopting to evolving customer needs, and then as you can see, slowdown in demand, business models, increased geopolitical and location risk is up from 8 from the previous year to 5 this year. What's interesting is from a perspective of talent, and as we link it to impact sourcing and sustainability, back in 2022, talent acquisition and management was the biggest concern that businesses were facing. It dropped to number 3 last year, and now this year it's down at 7. So what we're seeing is businesses are realising that talent management and acquisition of talent is less of a problem because as we've gone into pre-recession, recession, depending on which viewpoint you've got or which country you're in. But actually talent is less of an issue for people right now. We still know there's a shortage of certain skills, so some of the high value skills, some of the deep technical skills are still in short demand. But if you look generally, there is less worry from the big industry that talent is a shortage. Actually, they feel as talent is available, but they're under major pressure in terms of cost and margin. So when we've asked them about what your priorities are for this year, 64% have said it's drive accelerated revenue growth, but also at the same time, they're saying they have to enhance profitability and cost optimization. So 62% have said that. So the key takeaway from when we talk to enterprises is their goal is to do more with less this year. Every year is to do more with less, I know that. So all of us have been in the industry a long time. And my previous background, so I was in procurement at Microsoft for a long time. So people saying now cost is important. Cost was always important for us when you're in procurement, but actually it's now, people are actually more openly talking about cost is a real focus, whereas in the past it was really procurement worry about cost, business can think a little bit more about what we want to do. Everyone is now really aware that cost is important. So what we're hearing is, it's about driving that revenue growth, but also managing your cost. And what we know enterprises are looking at is how do you balance those levers And what we're looking at is technology modernisation and upgrading. So maybe the second mention today of AI, but that's the big topic that we're people, which is how we're going to leverage AI, Gen AI, to really drive down our volumes, improve our efficiencies to get those savings and do more with less. A real focus on data analytics and insight utilisation. So leveraging the data you've got on the business, on the operations, on your customers, and being able to really drive that forward to improve the bottlenecks in the processes, to make it more efficient, to improve the customer experience. So that's the second lever. And then the third lever, process optimization and operational efficiency. So again, a lot of these have already been there, but sometimes depending on what's going on in the market economics, they can become more or less important. But these are the three key levers that we heard loud and clear from our buyers, which is their three levers they're going to be looking for this year with their service providers, but also with their businesses, to be able to try and drive these goals. If we think about the second issue, global businesses or enterprises are expecting actually that their global services budget will remain flat or maybe marginally increase over time. So what we're not expecting is there's going to be a massive increase in spending. But what that means is we're also expecting to see headcount growth is going to be lower, but there is more of a preference for offshore locations. So what we've seen is back in 2023, you're thinking about where your headcount growth was going to be, 2.3% was onshore, 7.5% was offshore. In 2024, yes, that number, 5.8, is lower, but actually all the other numbers are much lower as well. So actually there's going to be a preference for more offshoring, and we know that in terms of driving cost. When we've done a piece of research in my own area looking at the impact of generative AI on CX, we are a little bit conflicted in terms of, is it really going to drive down the amount of offshore or increase the amount of offshore in the next 3 years? Because we do know the outsourced CX market will reduce in size because of generative AI. But when you think about where's the work going to be done, then it's the debate whether actually by doing more automation and agent assistance, could you do that work offshore? Or are you going to need a different level of worker, which maybe you have to be onshore? And for me, the jury's still out a little bit on that, because depending on where we get to with Gen AI, but we do know that what's going to be left in 3 to 5 years' time is going to need much higher levels of problem solving, high levels of empathy, contextual awareness. And when we talk to a lot of the industry bodies, so we talk to the industry bodies in South Africa and Philippines and India, they're wrestling with how do they upskill their workforce as well to be able to deal with these challenges that come in 3 to 5 years' time, because the simple transactions will be eliminated. If you think about the third issue, and when we talk about GBS, Global Business Services, this is what we used to would call captives or in-house centres. So when you see GBS, think about that. What we've heard is actually there is going to be a swing towards doing more work in a shared service captive GBS, and actually potentially a swing a little bit away from outsourcing. The reason for that is because organisations are thinking, well, if we're going to invest in this technology, how do we leverage that from an in-house perspective, and do we need to outsource as much? But there's a nuance to that, which is depending on the line of business. So for CX, for example, so customer experience, people are saying they are going to continue to outsource. For F&A and other areas, some people are thinking, well, actually, would we do more of that in-house? So it can depend very much on the activity and also how much you've already invested in outsourcing. But the data is showing organisations are thinking they may see a little bit of a swing back towards a GBS model. The contradictory factor to that, though, is that we are seeing a lot of captives being sold off now to service providers. And there's a lot of interest from service providers around which captives are up for sale, because they actually want to take that volume, take it outsourced, because it gives them the capability, but also gives them a new customer. So there is a bit of a contradictory factor to that, but actually we are seeing that, say, there is a move to more GBSEs being set up, as organisations are thinking, well, if we're going to invest in this technology, and we're going to invest in the tech skills, then let's keep it in-house versus outsourcing it, because we might need it in the future. So interesting, and we're going to be continuing to watch that trend as it goes. So what we've seen there is, if you look at the growth of the IT BPO services industry, we are still expecting it to grow, well, it will be lower than it has been in previous years. So I think in 2020, height of the pandemic, we actually saw it shrink a little bit as people were not necessarily moving outsourcing. Again, very different depending on the line of business. So we saw in customer experience that there was a massive growth in outsourcing as people were still trying to serve their customers, but other areas kept that work in-house. What we saw is that as we came out of the pandemic in 21 and 22, the numbers grew very, very sort of flat from 2023, and we're still working on getting the full numbers for last year, but actually it's looking like it'll be relatively flat and won't grow much in 2024. So there will still be volume out there from an outsourcing perspective, but it won't necessarily be growing as it has done in previous years as well. So when we think about what do global services, whether it's outsourced or captives, what do you need from them, or what are businesses expecting from their outsourcers or from their GBSEs in terms of generating business or contributing to the business goals? The first expectation is around streamlining processes to optimise cost. So that's what the business is saying they expect from their outsourcers and their GBSEs. So help me to streamline my costs, because if I can streamline my costs and optimise my processes, I'm going to do more with less, which is what I said right at the beginning, is a key priority. There's also a focus around contributing to top-line growth. So how can the GBS or the outsourcer start to become more of a profit centre versus a cost centre? Those of us who've been in outsourcing for a long time, especially in contact centre, was always seen as a cost centre. You want to be a profit centre, you want to contribute to top-line growth. And actually the business is now saying that's what you should be doing. We're not going to just keep throwing money at these organisations. You need to think about how you're going to generate revenue for the business, which puts a lot of pressure on the sourcing team, but also the delivery and operations teams as well. And sometimes, and I'll touch on it at the end, linking it back to sustainability, that's one of the challenges sometimes, which is demonstrating the ROI when you're under severe cost pressure and sort of process improvement, and you're trying to drive that. And then introducing one new thing can be seen as what's the ROI on it. And I'll talk a little bit about the end, but I'm sure today you'll talk a lot about how you show the ROI of sustainability. And I'm a big believer that it does drive a lot of business value, but you do have to demonstrate that to be able to get it through, especially when the reason that we wanted these slides in first is that the underlying principle is do more with less. So there isn't massive investment out there. The third priority from the GBS or in-house is around augmenting the technology capabilities. So how do you bring new technology into the business? And that's what we're hearing, which is everyone's really hyper about Gen AI. But even if you look at somebody, like a lot of organisations we talk to, they want all this new technology, but they don't even have knowledge bases for their call centre agents. They don't even have their data under control. The data's all over the place. They don't have the basics in place. So how can they leverage their GBSs, all their outsourced providers, to really help them take a big step forward in terms of technology? Data analytics, so again, touched on it earlier, that's the biggest, one of the biggest areas people are looking at. But how do we leverage the data that we spent all these years capturing? Probably not got it in the greatest shape, but how do we leverage the data we're getting to drive sustainability activities, or business improvement activities, or customer experience activities, or cost reduction activities? But how do we leverage the data that we've spent millions building, capturing, trying to store securely? How do you use that to drive business objectives? And then lastly would be around strategic process re-engineering. So again, it goes back to that to do more with less. How do you re-engineer your processes at a strategic level? And we know that trying to get organisational change at a company-wide level is incredibly hard. But how do you do some of that re-engineering in the key process areas, and leveraging your GBSs or your service providers are one way that actually can drive some of that change. So if you think about the expectations of service providers, so as the buyers in the room will probably think this is what we expect. If you're a service provider in the room, this is what your customers are thinking of. But product and service quality is number one. Productivity is now number two. They have switched actually, which is quite interesting, because you would have thought actually that productivity would stay at number one. But the data is saying actually productivity is now number two. Delivery time, flexibility is still number four. But look at the sort of the new entrants, if you like, so ability to introduce innovative ideas, support for tools and technology, and customer and user experience. They're all up from previous years. So what we know is, and great for me as someone who focuses a lot on CX, there is more of an acceptance that CX is really important, but actually looking at leveraging your service providers to actually be able to bring technology, but also product service quality, productivity. Those are the areas that your buyers are thinking you need to be bringing to a service provider. If you're a buyer, these are the things that you're typically looking for your service providers to bring to you. But there is a big gap between what a buyer wants and what service providers are delivering. So what we've seen is satisfaction with service providers is declining. So people are less happy with their service providers. I think in 2021, there was a little bit of a halo effect of everyone worked really hard during COVID. We really appreciate all the efforts you did, and the numbers are a lot higher. Since then, we've seen that decline to 4.6 to 4.8. And what we've seen is when we talk to enterprises, why are they unhappy with their service providers? Lack of innovation. I do have a bit of a problem with this one, which is a lot of the times when I was on the buyer side, we would beat up our service providers, not physically by the way, but we would beat up our service providers for not bringing innovation. But when the service providers who were actually willing to push back and say, well, what do you mean by innovation? We didn't really know. We just wanted some innovation. We didn't know what that innovation looked like, especially when, as a sort of technology company like Microsoft, we were saying, don't bring us tech innovations because we'll do that ourselves, but bring us other innovation. But we didn't know what we wanted, and they didn't know what we wanted. So every SBR, every 6 months, we just told them they weren't very good at innovation. They asked us what we wanted. We said we didn't know. We moved on and did it again 6 months later. So I'm not proud of that, by the way. But it was an issue. So, but lack of innovation is really important to think about. Being very clear at the beginning of the contract to say, what do you mean by innovation? So how do you measure innovation? Because we have had providers go, well, we're going to put an innovation box and we're going to have 10 innovative ideas every month. That just means people look to give 10 ideas. They're not necessarily innovation linked to the business. It's a bit of a sticking plaster, really, for an issue. So innovation is the biggest area of satisfaction, though. Slow decision-making and agility, and then poor communication and stakeholder management are the next two issues. We recently did a study of, we interviewed 45 enterprise buyers, and we asked them their opinion of 6 leading service providers, and we asked them to rank them 1 to 6. And basically every one of those 45 people said, there's not much differentiation between any of those. The only thing that differentiates them is the account management and how they manage me as a client. So interesting from a service provider perspective, which is, it is a crowded market. There isn't a lot of innovation out there in the market. No one is really differentiating themselves that well. So that's an opportunity. But the thing that keeps people loyal is not innovation or any of that. It is how well you're managing that account. So that's one of the areas that people should be thinking about as well. So what we're seeing is there is an intent to think about how we balance some of our work across our service providers. So we're not necessarily seeing people going whole scale and buy, like finding lots of brand new providers. And actually, quite interestingly, we've seen a drop away from consolidation. I think consolidation was a big factor last year. We saw 34% of organisations last year saying they were looking to consolidate. This year they're not, which actually is a surprise. What they're looking at is how do we actually rebalance across our existing providers, and they're going to reward the ones that are bringing innovation, the ones that they do have a good relationship with. So that's sort of the key areas that people are focusing on now. It's not consolidation. I think consolidation was good last year. People are thinking about how do I go after some savings. What they're seeing this year is actually, well, I also need them to be able to drive this process optimization. If I start and giving it, like consolidating from 5 to 4 providers, I start again with that line of business I've moved. So it's more about how to redistribute the volume or the business versus just consolidating for the sake of consolidating. But when you think about also where people are going to invest, so these are some of the investment areas that we know businesses are going to be investing in the next 6 to 12 months. Cyber security, I think with all of the noise around Gen AI, you can't get away from that. You need the level of cyber security there to really be able to protect the business. You then got cloud solutions. You've got advanced automation, cognitive, you've got big data and analytics, which I've talked a lot about, and then you've got generative AI. And that's a new addition from, obviously, last year. We weren't really talking about, 2022, we weren't really talking about generative AI. So it's interesting that it's now made number 5, but still, although there's a lot of hype on it, we're actually doing a piece of research right now which looks at how many actual deployments are there of Gen AI versus how many proof of concepts there are, because I think there's a lot more noise about it than there is actual deployments. But we're trying to prove that out so we can really understand that. But we do expect generative AI to have a real impact on workflows, which then ties a little bit back to, as we think about sustainability, workforce, where you're going to need your people. Only 8% of organisations said there's going to be no impact of Gen AI. 67% said they're going to improve or transform the workflow. So that's going to actually change the way that we look at processes. That could change the way we use people. That's going to change the way we look at skills. And my last slide, as if it was planned. So what about sustainability? So today is sustainability, and I know that's the focus. We wanted to say, as I said, give you a sense of what's happening in the industry. But when we look at sustainability, what we can see is it's definitely a board level challenge that we know boards are talking about. If you look at the slide, and the colours always get a bit funky when I present on this stage, but what you can see there is in Europe, the amount of deals that have been signed around sustainability has massively increased. Actually, around the rest of the world, it's either stayed flat or declined a little bit. But actually, Europe, we've seen a massive growth in deals that are being signed around sustainability enablement. And when we think about the type of deals that have been signed, it's around optimization, decarbonisation, measurement and reporting, which is an area that we get a lot of questions about, which is, this stuff's all great, but how do we measure it? How do we report it? How do we get a level of consistency? And you can see the other areas there as well. So sustainability hadn't come up as a big issue or a challenge. I think it's an opportunity. If we did an opportunity study, then I think there would be a different answer, but we looked at challenges. But definitely know that sustainability is on the board's agenda, and there is an increase in deals in Europe. And that's it from me.